Good morning. One of our elders at First Cumberland, Marshall Watson, is under the care of hospice now, and I've been thinking about him a lot lately, and one of his God-given superpowers is that he loves young people, and young people just love him back, and that's almost surprising. If you'd asked me a few years ago who would be the most likely person to really love young people and for them to love him back, it might not have been Marshall, because as Marshall himself says, he's not a spring chicken anymore, and yet he does, and they do, and they are now repaying some of his ministry now, as a number of them have been to see him since he came under the care of hospice and is unable to make it back to church now. And that reminds me how often it is that God calls people that are not what we might call the usual suspects. Sometimes God calls people with checkered pasts. When God called Jeremiah, Jeremiah said, "I'm too young." When God called Abraham, Abraham said, "I'm too old." When God called Moses, Moses said, "I have a speech impediment." And all of those people, yet God still said, "No, I will equip you. You don't need to worry about that. I'll take care of it." And it happens even to this day, of course, as it has done with Marshall and with others. And I was thinking about all these things, and then I noticed in our Cumberland Presbyterian magazine an article written by Linda Petty from the Red River Presbytery, and she says that she's had an awful lot of opportunities during her life to minister to others, but in some ways it's come at during times where she was facing some difficulty. She says that one event that changed my life in what turned out to be a good way, I was standing up in a church service and fell sideways slightly. It was very strange because I knew there was no reason. I eventually went to a neurologist who conducted several tests and sent me to Johns Hopkins. After several weeks, it was confirmed that I had multiple sclerosis. This would seem unsettling, but another event happened which led me away from any anxiety about my own medical issue. Shortly after my diagnosis, my daughter, while attending Gettysburg College, had a psychotic break. I could not begin to focus on my own illness because I was so heartbroken about her future. When you have a child that is so gifted and so kind and so compassionate, it's very difficult as a parent to focus on your own issues. Throughout the years, my MS has progressed to the point of putting me in a wheelchair, and my daughter's bipolar diagnosis has led to numerous hospitalizations and ultimately to her being in a mental health facility. Fortunately, I've been able to serve the Lord over the past 20 years in numerous ways. Meanwhile, my precious daughter has written children's books, leads Bible studies in her facility, and loves working with children. And then she says something very profound. When God puts a call on a person's life, nothing can be an obstacle to giving the good news. I've had some humorous moments, she says, from the wheelchair and some frustrating ones. God has continued to work in and through me, and it is a glorious feeling. The bias against individuals with disabilities does exist, and very slowly is being addressed in many areas of our culture. We have a long way to go, particularly in the church. We aren't always prepared to receive children or young adults with special needs, and yet they are a tremendous blessing when we as a church resolve to welcome them with the love of Christ. I'm grateful that God has given me so many opportunities to serve Him and give the good news to so many people in so many different venues. I pray that God will continue to use those of us that have challenges, and that the church will be aware that God will use who He wants and will enable His children with sensitivity and compassion toward those with disabilities. We have to work on that issue. Are we willing to begin? And I take from this a couple of things. One is, no matter what excuses we may have, God promises to equip us. And before we write somebody off as not being able to minister, let us recognize that God probably has tremendous plans for them, and it may be our job to encourage them or even to learn from them and let them minister to us. And of course, we can do all of these things because God is with us. Amen.